Hey, thank you and good evening, everyone. This informational event will provide the community with an update of the work overseen by the district's Bell Time Task Force. My name is Dr. Vincent Pecchia, and I am the district's Assistant Superintendent of Operations and School Support. I'm a former graduate of Puyallup Schools, and this is my 26th year in public education, with 21 of those years here in Puyallup. I am joined here this evening by two colleagues, Executive Director, Communications and Public Engagement, Sarah Gillespie, and Principal Consultant for Strategic School Consultants, Ryan Hahn. During this event, you can submit your questions via the private chat at any time. Moderators will do their best to address questions during the Q&A session at the end of the formal presentation. Please include your email address for follow-up questions that are not addressed, or if they're not addressed. In alignment with one of the superintendent's goals, review of Bell schedule and transportation efficiencies via task force, the Bell Time Task Force Charter outlines the following deliverables. Per Policy 6600, Transportation, create and recommend new efficient bus routes that improve on-time performance starting with the 23-24 school year. Incorporate recent Safety Advisory Committee recommendations for safe walking routes. Assess future needs for facilities master planning to ensure students have equitable access to programs, and present to stakeholder groups, district staff, and board of directors as needed. Considerations that guided task force discussions are displayed here on this slide. The task force understands that movement in bell times has potential to positively or negatively impact childcare, sports and activities, student learning, and equitable program access. So why is this work necessary? Our district has inequitable access to programs for students. While some programs offer transportation, others do not, and this limits the number of opportunities for students and families. During the 21-22 school year, we had to pause bus runs, and we currently have 4 schools that are experiencing double bus runs. We are challenged with consistent on-time performance, long ride times for students, and the canceling of runs due to challenges related to bus driver substitute coverage caused by the nationwide bus driver shortage that impacts our district at the local level. Shown here is our district's current bell time model that is not efficient due to traversing tiers that interfere with each other, leaving little to no room for adjustment when it is needed. This model was designed to address unique challenges within a region or individual school community, which over time has proven to be unsustainable. The district's communication department launched the first of 2 surveys in January. The survey focused on current bus rider experience and bell schedule. The survey was open for 2 weeks with 3,883 respondents. Survey results that include quantitative and qualitative data will be shared in the next several slides. All data obtained from the first survey will not be shared during this informational event. However, we have included pertinent data points to share with the community. Regarding childcare, respondents to the survey are concerned with an increased cost, needing time to adjust and or accommodating to a new bell schedule, a perceived impact on working parent schedules, and challenges with older sibling supervision. Sports. Respondents to the survey are concerned with athletes who work getting out later than current bell time. Some respondents indicated that junior high releasing later than high school supports 9th grade sports participation, while other respondents believe that high school and junior high school students participating in sports will not get more sleep with a later school start time. Student transportation. Respondents to the survey are concerned that elementary age students will wait at bus stops in the dark with an earlier start time. Some respondents would like more access and reliable bus service, while other respondents would like the district to consider bus options for out-of-district students. And lastly, general start times. Respondents to the survey shared that junior high school and high school students currently start too early. Some respondents would like the district to consider alternating early and late start elementary school bell times and consider a later start time for high school so students have more time in the morning. I will now share quantitative data derived from respondents who identified as a family member, parent, or guardian. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being most satisfied, respondents were asked to rate their satisfaction of starting school earlier than their current school start time. Displayed here are respondents who have students attending elementary school. Most respondents are satisfied with the idea of starting school earlier than their current start time. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being most satisfied, respondents were asked to rate their satisfaction of starting school later than their current start time. Displayed here are respondents who have students attending elementary school. Most respondents are not satisfied with the idea of starting school later than their current start time. And then lastly, for elementary school, family members, parents, or guardians, and again on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being most satisfied, respondents indicated that they are not satisfied or neutral when it comes to dismissing school later than their current dismissal time. Okay. Displayed here are respondents who have students attending junior high school. Most respondents are not satisfied with the idea of starting school earlier than their current start time. Again, displayed here are respondents who have students attending junior high school. Most respondents are satisfied with the idea of starting school later than their current start time. And lastly, regarding junior high school family members, parents, and guardians, most respondents are satisfied with the idea of dismissing school later than their current dismissal time. Displayed here are respondents who have students attending high school. Most respondents are satisfied with the idea of starting school earlier than their current start time. Again, displayed here are respondents who have students attending high school. Most respondents are satisfied with the idea of starting school later than their current start time. And then lastly, regarding high school family members, parents, and guardians, most respondents are satisfied with the idea of dismissing school later than their current dismissal time. This is a draft bell time model that was built from stakeholder feedback considerations to date. At this point in the work, we move away from bell time scenarios that were meant to generate conversation and move toward a model like what is displayed here. The details of the model displayed here may change based on additional feedback, such as what elementary schools are in Tier 1 and then in the later tier in the morning. And we will take additional feedback as well as from this virtual event, meaning the order in which school levels are displayed will remain intact, but the times in which the tiers are displayed could shift. And again, that would be based on additional feedback from engagement survey, from the virtual event, and other feedback that's received between now and when a recommendation is given to the board of directors. Displayed on this slide is an update of our Bell Time Task Force timeline. A second engagement survey is scheduled to go out to stakeholders no later than March 20th. On March 20th, at a regularly scheduled school board meeting, the board of directors will hear a report that shares deliverables aligned to the Bell Time Task Force charter, along with the bell time model shared with all of you this evening. On April 5th, the Board of Directors will hear a report of the recommendation with a request to consider acting on adopting new bell times starting with the 23-24 school year. So at this time, I will turn it over to Sarah Gillespie, again, who's our Executive Director of Communications and Community Engagement, and she will facilitate questions.
Thank you, Vince. Now it's time for us to begin answering questions that we received during the presentation. So as a reminder, please continue submitting questions in the chat that you'd like for us to answer verbally and address here in this forum. And you're also more than welcome to submit questions and comments to the email address that you see on that screen. So throughout the presentation, we've compiled a list here of the questions in the order in which they were received. So I will launch into this right now. And the first question was, when will we know exact school times? So Vince, would you like to address when school times will be able to share near to final school times with the public?
Yeah, we're actively working on that now. And at the March 20th school board meeting, which is the next school board meeting this coming Monday, that is when times will be shared with the board of directors and community at large. Okay,
thank you. And I think for the purpose of engaging folks and getting additional questions in the chat, Curtis, would you mind going back to the draft model so we can keep that up on the screen so folks can kind of digest that and look at that while questions kind of roll in here. So the next one, let's see, I'm thinking that maybe Vince, you can take a first stab at addressing this. So this participant says, why are the only groups impacted by such a change in bell times elementary and junior high students? Why not high schoolers moving to an earlier start of their day? As seen on most of the previous slides, most high schoolers don't participate in sports, but many are eager to be released from school to head to their jobs and other activities, or perhaps babysitting younger siblings. It seems that it would make sense for high schoolers to begin the earliest and end the earliest. Older children would also be more safe in the dark at bus stops than younger kids, for sure. So Vince, why don't you go ahead and address the high school question first, and then the elementary question and being in the dark second.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually have Ryan respond to this particular question. Yeah.
Okay, so most of the schools in this particular model are impacted by movement. So the driver shortage crisis that has affected all school districts, most all school districts nationwide, is what's driving a lot of the need to have a distinct 3-tier bell time model. So as you can see in this draft model, all of the buses are used for an early elementary tier, then they're all reutilized again for junior high, and then they're all reutilized again during a high school shared tier with elementary schools that start again at that time. We did a lot of daylight comparison chart work that has been worked through with the task force, and also that was shared with the board during a study session last Friday, the 13th, or excuse me, not the 13th, the 10th. And in there, it gives examples, which those are available. It gives examples of when actual daylight time and non-daylight hours are occurring for students waiting for buses. And what we found was during the winter months, late fall, winter, and early spring, many of the students were waiting in the dark, and it was not necessarily dependent upon which age group they were. And in the afternoon, when it gets dark so early, the later dismissing schools, which are our elementary schools at that time, were the ones going home. The later dismissal schools were the ones going home in the dark. Did that answer some of those questions?
Yep, that's good, Ryan. Okay, this next question, because we're starting to receive a handful here, so we're gonna start to address them a little bit more quickly. Will this affect schools who are walking schools or just busing schools? So these changes will go into effect for everyone at all schools. So I just took answering that one. Okay, this next question. Elementary, do you think a 3:51 dismissal for elementary with some buses dropping off in the dark is appropriate? Ryan, you kind of addressed this already. How will this, and then this next question, because we've gotten a couple around our highly capable programs. So how will this impact transportation for Quest programs in our elementary schools? Vince, do you want to take a first stab at addressing that?
Yeah, we are actively engaged in conversations around that. And I know that there was a change in how our students served in Quest were brought to and from their program. And we are working to keep some of those practices that we know that our families want that shortly after the pandemic in place, and moving back more toward a model that serves our students better than it currently is now. I will kick it over to Ryan if he wants to add anything to that.
Yes, so with the Quest and Page programs and this particular model, a lot of the feedback that drove kind of how we put this together, well, one, we have a maximum number of resources available, which are school buses. And we cannot sustain the current model based upon all the different start and end times and the gap in between in which the buses can be reutilized. So in order to provide the same level of service for our Quest and Page students and other programs that may be able to utilize hub stops like those programs do, those elementary schools can be easily serviced at the early tier to be able to pick up those students on their way to their runs and take them to school. In the afternoon, there's enough time to take all of those students home, drop them at their hubs, schools or locations on the way to their junior high runs in the afternoon as well.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Okay, this next question is in regards to the high school schedules. Have you considered following the scheduling pattern used during the pandemic for high school students? Vince, do you want to take a first stab at that?
Yeah, we didn't necessarily look at the pandemic schedule when we were designing this bell time model. Again, the bell time model that's displayed here this evening is really taken into consideration all of the feedback that we've received to date. And then, of course, looking at the engagement survey and what most respondents are satisfied with, which is why we see high school going after junior high school. It was important for the community and some of the stakeholders that serve on the Bell Time Task Force, as well as other feedback that we received, like I said, through the engagement survey, that our students, particularly our 9th grade students, have access to advanced classes and athletic and other school activity opportunities. And if they go after high school, there's more challenges with that, which is why our junior high school students in this model are going before high school. So they can keep kind of a similar schedule that they do now. It would just be shifted to a little later in the morning.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, this next question, the participant is asking with regards to the timeline. Did I understand correctly that a final proposal will go to the board for approval on March 20th? And that, and if so, what purpose does the second community feedback serve?
Yeah, that's a great, oh.
Yeah, I was just going to say, go ahead, Vince.
I'm just going to say that's a great question. And so, no, there's not going to be a final proposal shared with the board of directors on March 20th. What will be shared with the board of directors on March 20th are the deliverables of the Bell Time Task Force that align with the charter that the Board of Directors adopted back in September. A draft Bell Time model, like we see here, will be shared with the Board of Directors that includes more detailed information, such as what elementary schools are in which tier, in addition to some times, some comparison charts that show what time elementary school, junior high, high schools currently start. And then if we were to move to a bell time model like that's displayed here, what those new times would be and how much time difference there is, either positive or negative, in comparison to what the current start and end times are. That will be shared with the Board of Directors. We are, of course, the second survey will still be open, and a final recommendation will go before the board on April 5th. And so there is time to make adjustments to the model based on feedback, which is why that recommendation will not go before the Board of Directors until April 5th. So there's time for all of the survey data to be analyzed, taken into consideration, and any further adjustments to the model can be made based on that feedback.
Okay, thank you. So we've received a couple questions, Vince and Ryan, with regards to specific scenarios. So this participant has noted that on March 10th, 2 scenarios were presented to the school board. Are these no longer in the running? They are very different than this draft model. So if you could speak to the differences between the scenarios that were presented for discussion and then now this draft model.
Sure. So the scenarios were meant to generate discussions. They were part of the work that the Bell Time Task Force engaged in. When we first started, we had 4 different scenarios. One of them was deemed not doable because we would have to staff up close to 50 or more drivers in order to actually implement one of the scenarios. And so the Bell Time Task Force really stopped talking about one of the 4 scenarios and then focused on the 3 remaining scenarios. Again, they were meant as discussions. They were meant to determine, what do we feel most comfortable as a task force moving forward, and what do we not feel comfortable with in regards to moving forward. An example of that, in what is reflected here in this particular model, again, is junior high going before high school. That was problematic from early on in the task force work. And so that is why we see here in this model, junior high is going before high school. So the scenarios were never presented as recommendations. They were meant, like I said, to be discussion starters, to generate the conversation. We took all of the input from those scenarios, all of the input from the stakeholder engagement survey number 1, all of the input from the virtual events, and then other input that we've received via emails or phone calls or whatever the case may be. And now we have an output. And that output is the model that we see here.
Okay, and so is it accurate to say, Vince, that this draft model is really a synthesized version of all of the scenarios that were being worked through from the task force?
All of the scenarios and all of the feedback that we've received to date.
Okay. So this next question, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry, and to add on to that, I think it's important to note that the one of the questions that panelists had, what are we doing to advertise and hire drivers? So there's a lot of work going into that on the back end to recruit and retain drivers. But one of the driving forces in how we landed at this particular model versus where the scenarios were at is because we know that the current bell time model is unsustainable, and we cannot engage in moving school bell times to a new model that would be also unsustainable. So this has to help with the driver crisis. So some of the pinch points, just to share, so that everybody understands, scenarios are created to teach the public and staff and parents, whoever's on the task force or whoever's listening to these meetings, about how logistics work, how many buses you can use over and over again, the space between the bars, which are the tiers that's needed to be able to make those things work. Where we're at right now with projecting a staffing model going forward into next year, we could not increase the Bell model to a 4-tier system, which largely looked like scenario 2, because you need more staff and more buses on the road to be able to pull that off. As you are able to add more staff and more buses, you can condense the tiers down a little bit. So the totality of the school day doesn't have to start as early and end as late for the first set of schools and the last set of schools. But we are still in the process of canceling runs almost on a daily basis due to a lack of drivers. This particular model, taken with all of the feedback, is something that is able to be accomplished in the fall.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So I think this question is really at the forefront of many of our elementary families. How are we making the determination of which elementary schools go in which tier, tier 1 or tier 2?
So Vince, can I talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a couple different major keys to that. Number one, we know that all of our schools that we bus students to that are out of their attendance areas in this particular model need to be, they need to have time to do that before and after school. So the likely place for those to go is in the early tier, okay? So that we're picking up at hub school stops or hubs locations for all those programs, and then continuing onto the run to drop them off at the school. Same thing in the afternoon, they'll drop them off at the end of the run. The other piece of that has to do directly with the charter, and that is the district tasked us with creating efficient school bus routes. So the routes are no longer going to be routed strictly by region, and some of them aren't already. It's kind of morphed over time, but there's a new set of routing standards that the district will follow to pair the bus as it drops off its elementary, it goes to its closest junior high, then it drops off, goes to its either closest high school or elementary, in that order. And it doesn't have to just go north-south along regional lines. They also will go east-west as well. And the last factor that we look at is as the number of total bus units that we have available to service this. And so in the first tier, we know that our absolute maximum to be able to sustain a model going into next year is 65 big buses running general education routes. And that number is 47 on the special education side. Just to give you some comparisons, in 2018-19, the district was running 145 buses daily on routes. The district right now is running 107, with several schools doubled up and runs being canceled on a daily basis. The new number between all of these tiers will be 110. So there's huge efficiencies found in pairing them correctly to one another and having enough time between the tiers to reutilize the buses to do that. As you move to the junior high tier in the green bars, it takes every single bus we own on the general education side to cover and service junior high routes. When you move into the high school and late elementary school tier, it again takes every bus that we own to provide service for both of those tiers. So it's a combination of things. It depends on like where the district houses their programs and how we get students to those programs, how many buses we have available to do that, and how much time they have to get from place to place.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Ryan, because some of these questions are really around the justification for needing to break up those elementary runs. Like why the need to have two two elementary tiers. So,
Absolutely.
and
And
go ahead.
there was another question in there. Is there any way to keep the feeder schools with the host schools in elementary? Well, if they're not a host school, they're a feeder school. So the answer is no. There's not enough buses available in that first tier to be able, we'd have to have 27 more buses on the road on the general education side to service elementary all at once. So it's really, we're doing the best given the constraints that we have in that.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So a couple questions coming through with regards to childcare. This participant is noting how it's going to significantly impact their childcare needs and wondering if Right at School is prepared and going to be discounted for parents that will no longer have childcare because of this. Vince, do you want to speak about Right at School?
Sure. I can't speak to whether or not Right at School gives discounts because they are their own entity. What I will say is that Right at School is prepared to adjust start and end times for their program based on whatever bell time model is adopted by the school district. So what that means is that they are prepared to start earlier in the day and or go later into the evening based on what their constituents' needs are.
Okay. So Vince, I'm also going to have you answer this next question. I feel it's an important one that really addresses equity throughout the district. This participant is saying, how does this schedule affect families who rely on older siblings in junior high to watch younger elementary siblings when elementary gets out before junior high? How does this support the district focus of equity when this is an issue that is often indicative of low-income families and families of students of color? So Vince, maybe you can provide some information with regards to the number of bus cancellations that we continue to have on a daily basis and those kids who we're just not able to transport right now.
Yeah, so what I will say in regards to the childcare, we currently have some elementary schools that are starting before junior high schools and or high schools. So we currently have that practice in place. Yes, I don't disagree that it's not as widespread as this particular model would be, but it is important to note that we do have a practice in place right now where some of our elementary schools are starting before or at the closely around the same time and dismissing around the same time as a secondary school. So that is already in place. And each family's situation is unique in regards to what their childcare needs are. When we put out that first engagement survey, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to go back and look, but one of the questions asked, do you rely on childcare, or is childcare a factor or whatnot when it comes to bell times? And the majority of respondents said no, which was interesting. And so when we build models like this, yes, we do take into consideration how it isn't going to impact families, knowing that each family has their own unique situation and how they access or don't access childcare. And so I just want to put that out there as well. What was the other part of that question, Sarah?
Let's see here. It was indicative of low-income families and families of students of color with siblings and that watch siblings essentially.
Okay.
So this next question, Vince, I think there's an opportunity here to talk about the research behind secondary students and starting school later and their ability to succeed in school based on that. So this participant is asking, why is the reasoning for elementary school children starting so early? Teenagers should start earlier. Younger children should start later. Why not switch the elementary and the high school schedules?
Yeah, okay, so I can respond to the just the research around the adolescent brain and what studies show is needed. And so in regards to that, there is research that suggests that adolescent aged students need more sleep just because of the fact that they're growing and whatnot than our elementary age students, meaning that there is more sleep required of junior high school age students in particular, and some high school students as opposed to elementary age students. And at the end of the day, somebody needs to go first, right? And the majority of, not only is the research suggest that adolescents go later in the school day, and that there is a correlation between academic achievement, and that there is no negative impact for elementary age students going to school earlier and academic achievement. Not only that, but then also we go back to the engagement survey results from survey number 1, and the majority of respondents in the elementary that identified as having elementary age students were satisfied with the idea and or neutral in some cases with starting school earlier than their current start time. On the other side of that, we also had junior high school and high school families suggest that they were satisfied with the idea of starting later than their current start time. And so again, what we see here is, in Sarah's words, kind of is a synthesis of all of that feedback.
Okay, so I'm seeing a couple questions with regards to ninth graders in sports. So this participant is asking, where will the ninth graders who play sports go while they wait an hour for the high school to release? Do we know the answer to that question yet, Vince?
Yeah, well, we currently have, again, that happening now in the district, where we do have some ninth grade students that are waiting for practice to begin or waiting for some other activity to begin at school. And so as we move forward, right, with, and whatever Bell model is eventually adopted or not with the board of directors, we will look at what is needed as far as if it's supervision or whatever the case may be for at our high schools in order to accommodate any students that are waiting for athletics or activities or something else happening at the high school to begin. But the practice of having to wait and having to wait at a feeder high school, again, is not new. We do have some of that currently happening, and that has happened in the past in our district.
Okay, thank you, Vince. So Ryan, I'm going to have you answer this next question. It really talks about or is questioning about the method in which these schedules, in which we come up with these schedules, and the formula for how many buses we have and the timing of the schools and the tiers and all that. So this participant says, could one half elementary students start at 8:30 and the second half start at 9:30 with high school students starting at 9? Is this enough time for the buses to change routes?
So there's a 50-minute tier requirement right now with the buses being reutilized 3 different times. That's a good question, because it's kind of what the district does now, which is unsustainable because it's not using all the buses 3 times. In fact, 20% of the big buses don't have a third run, which causes part of the issue with inefficiency. This particular model allows us to use less drivers to do more work, meaning they have more runs. Part of the number of units that are available right now, currently we have 59 large buses running, and we have several runs that are double runned And then when there's absences, runs unfortunately have to be paused or canceled because of that. So what we know is that we use every bus we own on the big bus side that can be driven by a driver right now, not necessarily all the ones that are parked that the district owns that we don't have enough drivers for. But during that tier, we're using everybody that we have to drive. So the reason why there has to be three distinct tiers, and granted that the late elementary tier doesn't have very many schools in it because we're using so many buses for high school already. There's just a very few late elementary schools that can go in that late tier. It's almost reversed of what happens now, where there's 15 schools running at the 9 o'clock hour here. That would be reversed in this particular tier. So, and we also know that our on-time performance rate is very poor in many areas of the district due to traffic congestion and pickup and drop-off problems at school buildings. So having said all that, our average run times, which are listed on this slide, 36 minutes for elementary, 41 minutes for junior high, and 39 minutes for high school, have to be taken into account. And we have to make sure that the buses can complete that and get to their next assignment with enough time to stage at a school in the afternoon. The morning isn't so much the problem because we always drop students at 15 minutes before the bell, and then the buses can proceed on to their next runs. In the afternoon is where the differential in instructional minutes catches up to us because we can't have kids waiting at the end of the day. So in the afternoon, the buses all go on their elementary first tier run. They have to be back and ready and be staged at junior high runs to be able to get in and out of the junior highs to continue on to their next set of runs on time. So like I said earlier, there's a maximum number of resources that we have right now, which is our driving pool. And even if we were to staff up over the coming months and look at what was feasible to onboard that many school bus drivers in the fall, we know that a three-tier model is the only model that's sustainable right now. As the district were to consider hiring more people, they could move this around a little bit. It's set up to where it could grow back into a smaller set of tiers. However, it takes a significant number of drivers to be able to do that. And that causes a greater level of inefficiency and money spent in the transportation department that would otherwise be spent in the school buildings on educating students. So I hope that helped answer the question.
Okay, that did, Brian. Okay, Vince, I'm going to lob this one over to you. Has the district ever considered a partnership with Pierce County Transit to help transport or move students?
No, we haven't. And there's reasons for that, partnering with an outside agency such as Pierce Transit to traverse our students to and from school. That is something that the district has not considered in the past, and something that is not part of the discussions currently with this bell time work.
Okay. Another question here with regards to the exact elementary schools that are in each tier. That's making sure that we mentioned this earlier, Vince and Ryan, that when we distribute the community survey, that those elementary schools then will be identified. Is that correct? In those tiers?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay, so that is why we have not launched the survey, because we are still kind of doing some more deep dive work into that. Let's see. So some more questions here with regards to sleep research, the Americus participant notes, and just for everyone who's still connected, I believe Ryan needed to disconnect real quick, Vince, and then he'll rejoin here. Is that correct?
He may, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we're okay. do we have examples of what the district is doing to find more bus drivers and buses? So.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I'll say about it's not buses, that's not the issue. We do have a lot of buses. The issue goes back to the nationwide bus driver shortage, and I know that we've talked about that before. And that certainly, as I have shared before, is felt at the local level. We, along with other school districts in our state and across the country, are actively recruiting school bus drivers. And what I will say is, if there is anybody out there listening that is interested in being a bus driver, please reach out, email me directly, and we will get you going on and getting certified to become a bus driver. And if you're not interested, maybe you have a friend or a family member who is. I'm sharing this because this is part of the recruitment strategies, right? To solicit interest. We do some of the traditional approaches, right? Of course, we post positions. We're at the local farmers markets. We will be, at the Daffodil Parade with one of our smaller buses, just advertising, work as a bus driver in the Puyallup School District. And we also go out and do other recruitment events, whether it be at job fairs. We work with, other agencies and organizations within the Puyallup area and outside of the Puyallup area to solicit interests, whether that be with church organizations or other business organizations or whatnot. But again, if you know of somebody who's interested, please have them reach out, because sometimes we find that just by building relationships, making connections, networking, we're able to solicit interest. I will tell you that our bus drivers work really hard. I will share with you that some of our students, the bus drivers, the first person they see, and our bus drivers welcome our students every morning, right? And they get them to school safely and they deliver them home safely. It is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to get connected with our district and to get connected with kids. And so, like I said, if you're interested, please reach out.
Yep. Thank you, Vince. So this participant is asking about the research sources validating the sleep
Sure.
needs of adolescents. So
Sure.
I believe, did we share that in the last informational, Vince?
I can't speak to whether or not we shared it, but it's something that we could link on our website for interested community members to look at.
I thought it was in our last informational, but we'll for sure push those out in public comms over the next few days here and share those with community members. Let's see here. Vince, I'm not sure if you have information on this, but I'll read what this participant notes. Can you talk more about the potential of adopting a rotational elementary schedule similar to Bethel? Meaning we would do 2 years on late and 2 years on early. I know there is a formula, just wondering if this is something that is being talked about and considered.
Yeah, this is something that is not being discussed currently with our bell time work. I do know, and as mentioned by this attendee, it is something that the Bethel School District does. Along with, any bell time model, there's positives and negatives with that. Like I said, it's not something that we as a school district and we as a task force are interested in. It can be disruptive for families. Every 2 years, there's a change in their school schedule, their school bell time schedule. And like I said, some families like it and others do not, but it's not part of the work that we are currently exploring here in Puyallup.
Okay. This question is in regards to creative solutions. So this participant is asking, Would hiring traffic control help with decreasing the 50-minute efficiency time for buses, especially at the high schools?
Yeah, that's an interesting, and I appreciate that comment, or that in that question. Not necessarily traffic control. What I will say is that we do have staff assigned at our schools just to help keeping the flow of traffic going. You often see that at the elementary schools in the morning with parent or family, drop off. You see that in the afternoon at our high schools where we have staff out. And the goal is that they're moving traffic along, right? What I will say is what we have talked about, but have not necessarily put into practice district-wide, is the idea of allowing our buses to go in and out of their school to pick up children or to pick up our students. And then we allow family members to come and pick up their students. So what I mean by that is that, and I'll just hypothetically use Hunt Elementary as an example, because I, at one point in my life, was the principal at Hunt. So I will talk about Hunt. So at Hunt, what that would mean is that we would hold off on any family member coming to the school or entering the parking lot pickup area to pick up their children. We would hold them until all of the buses came in and out of the bus loop. So we're kind of preventing a backup from happening because we're allowing all the buses to go in and out first. And then we allow family members to come in either to drop off their children or pick up their children. And I know that this is a practice that one of our junior high schools actually implemented a couple of years ago. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Callis Junior High. And it seemed to go very well for their school community. And I also know that there are some other districts that have that practice in place. Because as we know, there are certain areas within our district that get quite congested with cars lining up to pick up students. And so the idea of holding family and parents or whatnot back and allow buses to go in and out, in theory, should create efficiencies with our on-time performance. So not necessarily traffic control, but an idea that somewhat aligns to that idea.
Yeah, we've received a couple other comments with regards to that, staff members not being able to access the school because, because of parent pickup lines. Okay, so this comment, from this participant is commenting on Fruitland. Fruitland Elementary is a mess. Buses wait forever to get into the loop while traffic is backed up forever on Fruitland Ave. That's correct. Let's see here. Yeah, a lot of feedback with regards to elementary. We realize that it's good. This is going to be, any disruption in bell schedules is inconvenience for families. So it's this is tough work. So this one participant is saying, let's see, how am I? So we're getting a few comments on thanking us for this work, that realizing, yes, it's very challenging. It's that we can't make everyone happy, but we do appreciate the accolades. Let's see. Personally, how soon would parents know if their elementary kids have the earlier or later schedule? I think we addressed that earlier, saying we will launch those times with the survey no later than Monday the 20th. This one participant notes, I personally love the early start for elementary. My kiddo is up early, so it makes sense. Thank you for this work. It is not easy. So it looks like we've gotten one more. Well, this one is speaks to childcare, Vince, which we've kind of addressed already, but elementary, our children are young and require childcare. Why was this not a higher priority in the decision-making process? So, Vince, do you have anything to add to all the variables that are being considered?
Yeah, there was childcare was and still is part of the discussion, along with athletics, activities, and other considerations that were shared earlier in this presentation. Again, each family member situation is unique. There are families that access childcare and families that do not. What I will say is that in the Puyallup School District, we do have, I would say more childcare options than other districts have when it comes to availability, childcare availability at students' home school. And like I said, it is something that we know, and I said this at the very beginning, it's either, sometimes it positively impacts a family situation, and there are at times it will negatively impact a family's situation. Anytime that there's a shift in bell times. And what we can't continue to do is to operate a transportation department that is the output of that is inefficient bus routes, right? We do not want, and I do not believe the community wants, the continuation of doubling bus runs. That's happening right now at some of our elementary schools. And what that means, if you're not impacted by that, is that we have a run where it has 60 students or 70 students assigned to it. They take half of those students home while the other half wait at school for 20 to 30, sometimes 35 minutes. And then they come back and pick up the rest of the students. And so the group of students who are waiting get home much later. Families don't like that. They don't want that to continue. And yet that's the situation we are in right now. The same with canceling runs. We don't want to be in that situation anymore. I know how that negatively impacts families and our students when they receive the call or the text or the email in the early morning informing them that their run has been canceled. And what that means is then that they are left trying to figure out how they're going to get their child to school. We don't want that to continue. And so we have to address our bell times. And again, any shift in bell times we know is going to, like I said, impact families in the way that it does, knowing that we have to create a sustainable transportation system. And right now it's not sustainable.
No. So Vince, I'm going to read one more question here before we close out for the night as we're approaching 7 o'clock. This question is really with regards to what we're doing to potentially raise driver pay and benefits to attract new drivers. So this participant is asking, has the district talked about raising driver pay and benefits to attract new drivers and retain them? So do you want to address this particular question?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the details of, the negotiated agreements and salary schedules and whatnot. What I will say is that the school district works in partnership with our bus driver union labor group. And we do meet regularly with them, and we do address needs that come up from that labor group. Certainly any discussions around salary and other topics, right, that are part of the negotiated agreement is done between the district and the bargaining unit in their negotiation process. So I'm not going to get into that here at this meeting because that would not be appropriate.
Okay. Okay, so we're approaching 7 o'clock. So we're going to move on to concluding our event for tonight and provide a few reminders for those that are still connected. First off, thank you for attending. Thank you for engaging. We realize your time is valuable and we truly appreciate you tuning in to learn more and stay connected. What can you do as this work evolves? Stay informed. Stay tuned, because within the next few days, we will release a bell time model survey, allowing everyone to review a final bell schedule proposal and provide feedback. Lastly, please use the email address you see here on your screen to send questions, concerns, or feedback. We monitor that. We respond to that within a 24-hour period. Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Ryan, who has already signed off, for sharing information tonight. And thank you all again for attending, and have a good evening.